Hey parents, happy Tuesday. Happy Taco Tuesday, Teenager Tuesday, all the Tuesdays. We're in part 4 of Majoring in Motherhood with Emily Shue. And if you don't know how to spell her last name, just go back and listen to last week or the week before. And would encourage you to pick up her book. You can find it on Amazon or I forget the...
Cruciform Press.
Cruciform Press. I gotta remember that. And if you're searching for it, search Majoring in Motherhood by Emily Shue. SCHUCH.
Yep.
Nailing it. Let's go. Well, Emily, let's dive right into it. There'll be an observation that I have from parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers is oftentimes, and I'm sure parents of all aged children, even kids, when their kids are in their 30s, parents feel this way probably, where they will give themselves a grade or rating of how good of a parent I am based off of their kids' behavior.
Yes.
And have you seen that, felt that? What do parents do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you use the word grade because that's in the chapter I kind of go into even in high school, we're all looking for identities and we find our identities in different things. And for me, my identity was totally in now and getting good grades or GPA or whatever. And so it's looking at okay, what are we finding our identity in? And then now in motherhood or parenthood, now it's kind of now I want to get good grades as a mom or a parent. And I kind of use this analogy of Adam and Eve in the garden, and they were naked and unashamed, but then after the fall, they knew they were naked and they were ashamed, and what did they do? They took on fig leaves to cover their shame and to cover the fact that they weren't enough anymore, and so that's sort of an analogy of the things that we try to find our identity in that are really kind of ultimately insufficient, kind of like fig leaves, probably weren't very good garments. But yeah, it's just kind of okay, well, maybe one day I am crushing it as a mom, and I have days like that where I'm we got all of our school done and everybody kind of behaved and I felt whatever I was, but okay, well, what happens if the next day all of that falls apart? And so anything that we're trying to find our identity in besides Christ is going to be, temporary and insufficient and vulnerable. Yeah. And so, if we're finding our identity in our children, it could change from day to day. We're not secure. But if you look at the story of the garden, then, okay, well, what does God do? God comes in and gives Adam and Eve garments made from animal skins that are much better. Yeah. And that's a foreshadowing of Christ, because that was really the first sacrifice for sin. And so points us to the fact that Jesus sacrificed to cover our shame and to give us an identity that really can't be touched and can't be changed by anything that we do or don't do, or by how our kids act or whatever. Yeah. But I feel that's a battle for me still, because I'm I want an A+. I want a perfect GPA in motherhood, and I still have that kind of perfectionist mindset. So and kind of going back to talking about sanctification, it's okay, well, when we put our faith in Christ, we're justified, and that's it. That's our identity, is we're righteous in Christ, we're justified in Christ, we're in Him, we belong to Him, and that's our most foundational identity, not even parenthood, because that feels it is such a significant part of who we are, but it's not the most foundational part of who we are. Yeah. It's kind of like there are many things that make us there are many pieces that make us us, but the substance of those pieces, every piece is God, every piece is Christ. Right. It's just how they clip together, Yeah. Which I think this really goes well into your chapter on vision, because I'll have parents, it seems like new parents, especially new moms, put the word just in front of their title mom. I'm just a mom now. Yes. I don't have an identity of me. I'm just a mom. Parents of middle school and high schoolers, I'll hear them say, I'm just their parents. Yeah. So it's they put this disclaimer of putting themselves down in front of this beautiful, amazing, weighty title of being a parent, of being a mom.
And you kind of talk about that a little bit in your chapter vision.
Yeah. Yeah, so the last chapter, again, like every chapter is kind of a subject. So it starts out, it's a philosophy chapter. That's what I studied in college. So it's talking about asking why, kind of hanging on to the vision, the bigger picture of parenthood that I think we can get very easily lost. And yeah, I'm just at home. I'm just doing this. I'm just doing dishes. I'm just doing laundry and whatever. I'm just scheduling doctor's appointments, and it kind of just the nitty gritty.
I'm just a driver. I'm
right.
Just
I'm the chauffeur or whatever. Yeah. And just to kind of step back and go, oh, but wait, what is the bigger picture here? And why? Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? And so that's a chapter where I get into the idea of glory, right? That we're created for glory, that our purpose is to know God and enjoy him. Glorify God and enjoy him forever. Okay, so how does the day-to-day of parenting connect to the bigger picture and to my purpose in the story of God's story? How does this connect? And well, it doesn't actually feel very glorious, our ideas of glory.
Yeah.
You think, okay, big important things, glamorous or something, and that doesn't feel a lot like a lot of parenting.
No. Teaching young boys to clean their room
does
not feel glorious.
Yes. Or just
the trying to do homework with them that you're like, wait, I forget this myself.
Yeah. So I was really wrestling with this idea of glory. How does my life as a mom connect to my call to glorify God? And it brought me back to where Jesus says, I was just talking about, so I remember the verses, John 12:23, where he says, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And this is what he said. And before he says this, he says, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. And so that's the immediate thing that comes after he talking about glory. And so that was what he said before he went to the cross. And so that's the picture that God paints us of how is Jesus glorified? Well, he was glorified by falling to the ground and dying and giving himself up so that he could bear much fruit. And so that's really the vision of motherhood and parenthood, is to sacrifice and to serve, to give our lives away in order that we would multiply, not just physically as parents, but spiritually as we disciple them. And that it's I like to say it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
So it's just keeping the bigger picture in mind so that you understand that it's delayed gratification, that, the work that we're doing now can feel meaningless, can feel not glorious, but that, God promises that if we're faithful, he will work through that and that it will hopefully bear much fruit.
Yeah.
Someday.
And it was so funny too, is like, a parent could do everything perfect.
Yes.
And yet our teenager, soon to be young adult, whatever, could decide, well, I don't want to be, I don't believe in God that way, or whatever, and that kind of, that doesn't mean, I don't think that means you were a terrible parent necessarily, or had a terrible, attitude, or there was more you could do. There's always more we can do. Yeah. There's always more that we think we could do in hindsight. However, I love that perspective of this is a sacrifice of me for God's glory. And there's been countless times I've seen people raise from middle schoolers into college, into young adult, and then choose not to be Christians but still act very Christian. Yeah. Because of
the investment. Yeah.
Parents, parents are like, I'm doing what I can to glorify God. And more often than not, those it seems like those students tend to come back around to Christ.
I was gonna say, even I think a lot of times, even if they do, go off, that the investment that you've made, it's still there, right? Yeah. And God can still use it. The story isn't over. Yeah. And so, I think that's totally true.
Yeah. Never over. Well, Emily, thank you for joining us on Teenager Tuesday on our Parent Podcast. This has been really helpful for me. I love the perspective. And again, if you haven't got the book yet, if you haven't gone online to the publisher's website or Amazon. It's Majoring in Motherhood by Emily Shue. Emily, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, parents, we'll see you next week on the podcast. For now, have a great week. Remember, you can do this. You're not alone. God is with you, and so are we. See y'all.